Chapter 9. Might Makes Right. Sir Eric and Mel's respite had been short-lived. Currently, they were racing through the forest at top speed. "Don't look back! Don't look back! Don't look back!" called Eric. They crashed through some thick foliage and tumbled down a steep hill. Eric scrambled to his feet and peered back up the hill. Nothing. They'd escaped. "All clear," he said, just as Hector burst out of the bushes and collided with both Eric and Mel. "Hector, what the—" Eric started to speak. "Shh!" Hector was wild-eyed and twisting back in the direction he'd come. 3 chicken-sized lizards zipped out of the forest and perched on a rock. They all stared at the creatures for a moment. "You've got to be kidding, Hector." The chickens bared their teeth and growled. "They're rather worse than they look," whispered Hector. A shield appeared, blocked the sun momentarily, and came down on the chickens from behind with a whoomp. The Black Knight lifted the dazed chickens off the rock and tossed them far into the woods. "Thanks," said Hector. She turned back to the knights. Her armor was scratched, dented, and muddied. Otherwise, she looked just fine. "Any trouble with terrible lizards out there on your own?" asked Eric. "You should ask them," answered the Black Knight, wiping her sword clean. The area was secure for the moment. Eric, Hector, and Magdalena rested in the shade.
And Mel.
Mel organized the sack of weapons. Hector opened the book. "I've had a chance to peruse most of the book. It is absolutely fascinating. The illumination work is also quite accurate. I did not know that Merlin was such an artist." "I've heard that Merlin has enchanted an owl to both write and draw," said Mel. "Bah," Eric cut in. "Enchant an owl to draw? He enchanted us to this wretched place. I should think he could manage to teach an owl how to draw," said Magdalena. "At any rate," continued Hector, "these terrible lizards are extraordinary in all ways. They're not dragons exactly." "They're knights." It was Bors. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, bloody and wild-eyed with excitement. It was not often that Bors's mind formulated an insight of any kind. He was on fire with the thrill of enlightenment. "It's true." He bounded up to the others. "They fight us. They fight each other. They fight to conquer, to eat, and, I think, to have fun. They have armor, and their claws and teeth are as sharp and true as any blade. Knights, you see?" "Knights?" said Eric dubiously. "Perfect knights," asserted Bors. "Whom do they serve?" asked the Black Knight. "That's the best part," Bors chuckled. "They serve none but themselves. Might makes right. Proof in the pudding." "Might makes right. Arthur says might should be used only in service of the greater good," stated Eric. It was Arthur's guiding principle, and Eric agreed with him. "Well, perhaps our king is misguided on that point," said Bors. Mel drew her breath in sharply. "How dare you?" Hector stood. "If you see Arthur, let me know. But in case you haven't noticed, Camelot is not here." Bors stomped up to Hector and leaned into him face to face. "We are knights, they are knights. We pitted against each other fairly. Together we show them who is stronger." Bors leaned in closer. "Might makes right." Thunderous roars tore through the charged air. The group froze. The roars trailed off into dead silence. "Where did that come from?" asked Eric. "Everywhere," said Mel quietly. They drew their weapons silently. Each knight looked in a different direction. Mel crept behind a boulder. "Maybe they're gone," said Hector. Then a tree crashed down beside him, and all was thrown into chaos. Terrible lizards of all shapes and sizes roared and gnashed teeth and chomped at one another. Great tails swung out, enormous clawed feet pounded the ground, and then they noticed the knights. That was when things really got started. Retreat! The knights and Mel ran for their lives. The ferns gave way to a rocky landscape. Hills of stone rose up everywhere. In a wall of solid rock, there was one narrow crevice. In here, shouted Eric. The knights squeezed through the opening in single file. Sparks flew as their armor scraped against the rock walls. One spark lit the weapon's sack on fire, but Mel immediately smothered it. At the opening of the crevice, the terrible lizard screamed and roared and scraped claws against stone, but it was no use. They were too large to follow. The crevice turned into a very long passage, and the knights shuffled through it. Eventually, it opened up into a crater-like area surrounded on all sides by steep rock walls. The crevice appeared to be the only entrance. In the center of the crater was a peaceful lake shimmering in the late afternoon sun. We'll be safe here. It's hot. I suggest we have a swim to restore ourselves, said Eric. He glanced at the Black Knight and Mel. Under tunics on. I think we can all agree. The knights did agree. It was the first thing they had agreed on all day. Mel, who was not a strong swimmer, opted to sit by the water's edge and organize the armor and weapons. She laid them out against the rocks. The others stripped to their underthings and waded into the water. It felt really, really good.